there's definitely a having kids to right-wing authoritarianism law and order pipeline. That's why the libs, the secular libs that all live in like cities all piled up on each other and they're all on their dating apps and stuff like that, they don't have the same values because they don't have little ones progeny that they need to ensure their survival.
Well, I- that's an interesting point because I fully can understand that. But how do you explain the left wing people who have kids and remain completely dedicated to the left wing cause?
It is a black magic witchcraft spell put on them by the media and social media companies in Hollywood. That's what I think. And also, it's a combination of that and radical compassion, and misplaced. Like most men are are more right leaning. It's women that have that radical compassion. So, and then they're also women. They're more susceptible to witchcraft than men
Oh,
are too.
well, I'm so glad that you responded that way because I found this clip that kind of breaks down um, why people on the left or women tend towards more. Again, I hate using authoritarianism, but more like tyrannical policies. And I thought this was really interesting here. Hold on here.
Orwell once wrote, "Women are always and inevitably on the side of the state." He wasn't being misogynistic, he was making a psychological observation. In his view, women, particularly in their role as caregivers and moral enforcers, tend to prioritize safety and compassion over risk and freedom. And that instinct, while natural, is easily weaponized by totalitarian systems. When conformity is marketed as compassion and control is rebranded as care, the state taps into the feminine psyche to enforce ideological obedience. Now consider this. Men will do almost anything to attract a mate, so when the state captures women through propaganda, redefining tyranny as empathy and compliance as virtue, men follow, especially those who can't compete in the traditional dating market. They feminize themselves and trade strength for submission. This is what evolutionary biologists call the sneaky strategy, low status males mimicking feminine traits or moral positions in hopes of reproductive access. And while all of this unfolds, families disintegrate. Single motherhood, a top predictor of poverty and social dysfunction, becomes the norm. Children from single parent homes are far less likely to climb the economic ladder, and who steps in as provider and protector? Not the father, the state. But here's the kicker. The state is funded disproportionately by men, so rather than supporting the women they married and raised children with directly, men subsidize the state, which in turn provides for women through social programs. Why? Because women have been propagandized to see every relationship as a power dynamic, except one with the state, which is ironically the centralization of raw power. They've been told that to rely on a man is weakness, but to rely on a bureaucracy is empowerment. This is not progress, this is dependency with a new face. And both men and women are suffering. The childless middle-aged woman and the incel are two sides of the same broken culture. A woman without her own child often directs her maternal instinct towards abstract causes, infantilizing minorities under the guise of social justice. What we are witnessing from psychologically unwell men and women is Nietzsche's concept of resentiment, envy dressed up as morality. The strong became evil, the weak became good, strength became tyranny. We now live in a pathologically soft society that sides even with those who harm it, where punishing crime feels unfair and victimhood is the highest virtue. Nietzsche called them the tarantulas, those who preach justice but act from bitterness. They don't want to uplift the weak, they want to drag down the strong. Orwell saw them too. Quote, "Most middle-aged socialists, while theoretically pining for a classless society, cling like glue to their miserable fragments of social prestige. These bitter, well-educated, and affluent types don't actually care about the downtrodden, they weaponize them. The real target is success, competence, independence, because those qualities expose their own inadequacies. But the answer to pathological femininity isn't pathological masculinity. It's not swinging the pendulum too far in the other direction. The answer is balance. Masculinity and femininity are not enemies. They're symbiotic. We've simply overcorrected. We escaped a world where masculinity once tyrannized femininity, only to arrive in a world where femininity is tyrannizing masculinity. We are not oppressed by patriarchy. We are being suffocated by pathological softness, envy, and resentment. And unless we recognize this imbalance, the future will not be free. It will be emotionally manipulated, morally confused, and biologically unsustainable. George...
Interesting.
How dare you? You guys are a bunch of misogynists. I'm off this stream. I can't even believe this. Get me out of here.
Come on, Tyler. It's all right.
Well, who's that? That bitch is crazy.
Yeah,
that is exactly right, though. That's what I was trying to say.
Mm-hmm.
Who made that video?
Let's see. That was Blender News.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, that was great.
I think that just sums it up so well, because when you, for lack of a better word, cuck yourself to endless femininity in the name of just gaining social status or being a good person, and they popularized toxic masculinity, that bullshit phrase that makes men feel bad for just being guys.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, like you said, you can go too far with masculinity and be too like, overbearing, or like there's a balance that needs to be found. But if you don't,
Andrew Tate,
yeah, sure,
situation,
yeah, like a lot of the manosphere, you can see that, and that's an overreaction to this overreaction. But if you allow society to just be ruled totally by the feminine, then what you get is law and order, like we're seeing, it's mean. It's bad to enforce borders. What about the children? It's like the children can deal with their issues in the country that they're from, and that's tough and it's hard, but you don't let children into your house just because I feel bad for them. You don't let random strangers into your house because, well, they're not doing as well as me. There's a certain level of you need order to have a decent life, and order is established a majority of the time by a level of masculinity that is
through authoritarian. Yeah, authoritarianism.
Respect my authority.
Say it with a southern accent. You'll get it.
I couldn't get it out.
No, you're right. I agree. Well, and that's kind of why I don't like Nancy Mace. You know, she's just such a feminist. Like everything she says sounds like it's just like crypto feminism that's kind of like, sneaking its way into, the right wing populism that should really just be a masculine movement. But being a real man, you're a protector. You respect women and take care of women. That's what being a real man is. That's what being a real masculinity is. As opposed to the Andrew Tate masculinity. I'm sure you guys have seen the videos where he's like beating that woman, and he's like, oh, that was just like, it was all consensual. She wanted to pretend like she was being raped. And I'm like, no, even if a woman asks you to hit her, you still don't do it because it's bad. That's wrong. And so it's like that overcorrection. And I think a lot of people, we were talking about like right-wing authoritarianism or, shutting down Nazis and having them come back stronger and bigger than ever. I think it's a slippery slope type argument, but I think a lot of people on the left, especially, and some people on the right are saying, hey, we need to be careful not to go too far right, if you know what I mean. We're on the track that we're going to go too far right. And it's like, no, we're just going to stop because we're smart and we have common sense, and we're not going to become Hitler just because we want to close the border, But I was going to say that law and order, or order versus chaos, right? And so that's like something that you were saying that kind of reminded me of that. And Jordan Peterson talks about this a lot, that masculinity is the order side of the yin and yang, and women are the chaotic side of the yin and the yang. And there's a little bit of that chaos inside of of the order, and there's a little bit of that order inside of the chaos. And I think a lot of people, especially women feminists, hate Jordan Peterson for saying that, because they same thing has how they equate authoritarianism with like evil tyranny. They equate with chaos as meaning bad and and really that chaos in the right way, used in the right way, is like a beautiful thing that leads to art and creation and actually propagation of the human race.
It's like the emotional energy, almost
Exactly.
like the chaos, and that's what the female side follows a little more than the logic or order side of a male.
And if you're all order, you're basically a robot, you know. And
Yeah.
if you're all emotion, yeah, then you're sometimes like psychotic, or you're completely unable to function on a day-to-day level. So you obviously need both. But we've gotten to a point, and it's so reflected in the social decay that we see, where you see guys smoking meth on the train. You see, I mean, the open border situation, just all of the different levels of breakdown in order that we see, because it's all in the name of compassion.
Mm.
I don't know who it was that said it, but it's like, well, are you having compassion for all of the people who are being forced to deal with this situation? Do you have compassion for the kids at the playground when they have to see a naked man, um, doing drugs or doing something that's not clearly not good for anyone, including him?
Free
Like,
speech.
right, yeah. And so that's where you have to step in and use authority to establish order. I mean, that is the ultimate purpose in my mind of authority itself, is to say what is allowed and what is not. And clearly you want to do that with the collective in mind. And ideally you want the consent of the governed, but at a certain point,
Ideally.
let's be honest.
No, we are going to force freedom onto everybody. We're going to force some order onto everybody. I don't mind being a dictator and forcing freedom onto people.